Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to our global Nimble community. Today's really a special day for me because I recently took a course on story selling, and I thought I was a storyteller all my life, and I really got schooled. I learned so much in this workshop, which is why I wanted to have Bernadette come and share her amazing gifts with you. Bernadette McClelland, say hello to our Nimble audience.
Hey, everybody. Or I should really say g'day, because that's how we say it back home, but g'day.
You know, I have a bucket list to go to down under. I have a lot of Irish ancestors that ended up down under. So what I love about Bernadette, is that you really are a teacher from experience. That I loved the story where you were really the support person behind sales people, and you walked into the manager's office and you let him know why you would be the person to hire. It was your persistence that got it done, but really your skills. And you translate that experience in sales success to the sales training that you've done, and I've watched you over the years. But really, it's the story selling that I'm so excited about that you are now doing, which is one of the reasons why you came to America. And you've been recognized globally as one of the top women in sales. And I really believe we need more women teachers, not just in sales, because I really do believe that the empathetic approach, the listening approach, really gets you more in life. What do you think, Bernadette?
I think so. And we'll share some ideas today that are going to help your audience. So looking forward to it.
All right. And for those that don't know about me, I have been building relationship management systems all my life. Started out with a company called Goldmine that predated Outlook and Salesforce, and today we're building Nimble. And if you want to learn more, go to nimble.com. And with that, McClelland, Bernadette, take us away.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, John. Great, guys. Really keen to share some ideas with you today on 3 of the secrets to becoming a story seller and not just a storyteller. So I think you've answered these questions, but you are in the right place if you're an entrepreneur, a sales leader, a seller, or a business leader. Definitely if you're growth focused, and definitely if you want to increase your sales figures without resorting to old-fashioned sales tactics. And you're someone who's an action taker and a decision maker, because both of those things in my book go hand in hand towards success. Okay, my promise to you today is to give you 3 high-level strategies that are going to help you sell more. Definitely going to help you with the conversations that you're going to have with your buyer, regardless of whether you are a corporate or regardless of whether you are a solopreneur. And so if you're saying to yourself, you know what, hey, I want to go deeper, I want to learn and I want to execute on what I don't already know, then you are definitely in the right place. So this is going to be a little different. It's not just tactics today, but it's focused on what I believe is key, and that is the ability for you to bring your whole self to the market, not just showing up in, one area one way and another area in another way. So some of today is going to be mindset and some of it is going to be practical. Have you ever been in an environment where you've been with somebody else and you've said, you know what, I really, really want to work with that person? Well, that is what we want your clients to start thinking about when wanting to work with you. So you're going to get access to some of the latest thinking around building your business, around neuro sales, and about story. And so we are going to get really practical. So there is unfortunately only 40 minutes to go, and for those of you who really resonate with me but we don't get a ton of content that I would just adore sharing with you, if you love my content, you love my style, you resonate with me and you're super serious about taking something to the next level, then right at the very end I'm going to share with you where you can take those next steps. But finally, regardless of anything, what I want you to do today is I want you, my biggest ask is for you to take action of some sort. Okay, no matter whether you stop doing something, start doing something, or continue to do something. And so I also want it to be highly interactive. So we're going to be using chat a fair bit. So I want you to type this word into the chat box right now, action. Okay, I want you to type the word action into the chat box, because at the end of today, after what John shares, I share, you're going to go away and you're going to do something productive and constructive. So what's my big idea? What my big idea about today is about transformation, okay, on a few different levels, by the way, guys. So I want you to realize that you are selling change. Doesn't matter what offer you've got, what your product, your service, whatever it is, at the end of the day, I want you to get crystal clear on the fact that what you are selling is change. And what your buyers are buying is not your product or your service, it is your conviction. And so secondly is because you need to change. There are some things that you're doing that maybe you would be better off if you didn't. There would be other things that that you might need to continue doing. And so we're going to really drill down into what some of those are. But more importantly, for you to make money as a salesperson, you need to create change. And so you need to move your business from one that is transactional to one that is transformational, not just for you, but also for your buyer. And so that's what we're going to look at today, and how we can leverage story to do that. So let me know in the chat, give me a 100% if you are in tune with what I'm saying. So just hit me up with 100%. And then we're going to move on to a little bit about you. And that is, I want to know, what is the hardest part of your role when it comes to the context of conversations? So I want to know, is it finding new clients? Is it getting to see the decision maker? Is it undercharging? Does it feel that, that maybe it's discounting? Is it not having the right relationships? Are you not able to communicate or negotiate confidently? So just key that into the chat. No judgment here. The first thing that comes to your mind, what is the hardest part of your role? And Julie, if you're there, I might just get you to call out a couple of those answers if you could. I'm not able to see the chat, so
approach, finding the right person, finding the right client, finding new prospects, differentiating yourself, relating to areas in front of the decision makers, and then getting them to take action.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Great. Because my goal today is to help you be that irresistible person that does get your foot in the door, that does get in front of the decision makers, and that does find new clients. It is to make money. And so I want you to make serious money in your business or your role or whatever it may be. I want to see you sipping margaritas on some beach somewhere. And more importantly, it is to have fun. And it's to make sure that the conversations you have out there with your buyers are fun, and that you find joy and just get into your zone of genius. The reality, though, for all of us is that things are changing, and it's probably not just COVID, but things are changing. For me, live events are coming back on board, and I just love that whole concept of people meeting each other face to face. Webinars and online is here to stay, so this format is here to stay, and I think that this blended model is brilliant. But our buyers' expectations have also changed. They know more than us. A lot of them have done sales training. A lot of them are now skilled up in NLP, so they're able to understand influence patterns. A lot of them now are going to committees instead of just, the one person we always used to rely on. Now it's going up the chain. And what we're hearing more and more of is the word maybe. And so we need to be able to address, okay, how can we create some kind of urgency with our conversations, and how can we move them along so that we don't just get our foot in the door, but we actually turn those doors into dollars. And so things are changing. It's painful, okay? This change is painful. It's emotional. It's stressful. And so it's like anything. If we don't squeeze life, then life will squeeze us. And if we're not embracing uncertainty, if we're not enabling circumstances to filter into our life that are painful, that cause us to grow, then we won't go to the next level. And so we are all designed to grow. And just like anything in nature, if we're not growing, we're dying. And so I want you to get out of pain as quickly as possible. I also think that scarcity is still very much a choice for people out there. So many of us will think, man, I'm not getting enough clients, and some of the clients I've got may not be the clients that I want. So having seen messages being tweaked, having seen stories shifted, we really can shift our results as well. So who here wants more clients? Just write the word clients in the chat box. Just write the word clients. We want more clients. All of us do, but they've got to be the right ones. And this is where I think some of you are getting stuck, because there's a lack of clarity around the milestones of your process and how to align the conversations and your narrative into that process. So I want to untangle you. I want to help get that pipeline moving again. But how do we re-engage with clients? How do we amplify our value? How do we elevate those conversations? Because you've got so much potential, all of you, and I really want to help you. I want to see you walk in abundance. And so, I've learned all of this through Tony Robbins, being Tony Robbins' coach, working with his entrepreneurs and his business clients, and working with Harvard Business School. Now, I'm going to tell you, when I was given this gig to coach the MBA clients, I was a little bit nervous because I'm thinking, I didn't do university or anything like that. But I've got to tell you that the gap that these really consultants of the future have is around bringing story into data. And so if we can learn anything from that, it's having a balance of data and specifications and product, and really aligning it with story. And of course, I now speak, as John said, I speak about story selling all around the world, because my premise, guys, is that all of us, we are just one story selling conversation away from the business growth we have always wanted, without worrying about feast and famine, without worrying about undercharging, or without worrying about hard sell tactics. So with your, where you're finding it difficult is in the conversion of clients and the connecting of clients. And so what I want us to do, and grab a pen and paper for this, if you've got your workbooks printed out that I sent through, I want you to draw this quadrant. We're going to quickly go through my conversion quadrant to kind of frame things up a little. So here we have connection along the bottom, low level of connection and a high level of connection. And going up the vertical line, we've got our conversions, and we've got low conversion results, and we have got high conversion results. Now within here, there are usually 3 levels of sellers. Now I want you to take note of these, because I'm going to ask you where you sit shortly. So we have those that are high level of connection but a low level of conversion. And when it comes to conversations, they can tend to be too chatty. Why? Because they waffle and their stories do not have a business point. So there's no relevance to their stories or their conversations. This can be because it's too much social speak, because you get on so well with somebody that you just keep talking about everything and anything and then realize that you haven't talked about business. They could be that they are intent on talking about themselves and their product, that they may not be the best listeners on the planet. It could be that they're always thinking ahead of what to say next or what questions to ask. And the thing is, a buyer, for these chatty salespeople, a buyer might be sitting in front of them nodding their head because they're hearing you. but not because they are connecting in with you or agreeing with you. And so the chatty salesperson usually can't take a cue and keep talking. Then we've got the salesperson who is extremely good, high level of conversion, but a low level of connection. Now they may be perceived as too pushy. Okay, so they've got really strong sales skills, but they're not picking up on any of the cues either. So these will be the ones that tend to bring too much data and product and technical talk, and they're not really picking up on the cues that the buyer doesn't really care. And while they might have this air of confidence, the value exchange is not there, and they're not able to build those relationships for repeat business or referral. So once again, the client or the buyer may end up ghosting them. Then there are those that have low level of connection and a low level of conversion, and we just refer to them as being checked out. Probably just going through the motions, sales are low, relationships aren't there. So that's really the transactional seller. So I want to know, where do you sit? Which quadrant do you sit in? Which one resonates the most with you? And once again, no judgment here. Key it into the chat. Are you too chatty? Are you too pushy? Or are you checked out? And Julie, I will get you to call out what you're seeing being written into the chat box.
Color me Chatty Chuck. We got a lot of chatty Kathys and Chucks here.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you for your honesty, guys. But look, that's a real, just a little point to check in. And what does resonate the most with us? Because ideally, where we want to get to is we want to have high results and high connection with our buyers. And so these are the guys who are really transformational with their clients. They're connecting and they're converting and they're booked out. So we're going from struggling seller to story seller. And story sellers are the ones who affect change. They're the ones that, that they provide real value, real transformation. They're speaking to the right people, they're selling change, they're building trust and connection, and they're getting the business. So I promised you that I would share with you 3 awesome secrets. And I'm kind of thought about that, and I thought, well, I'm also going to put mistakes there as well, because I think, we like to look at things in 2 different ways. So I'm going to take you through 3 principles now that are going to help you become more of a story seller. So let's dive in. Number 1 is sell with story. I want you to be an in-demand seller. And here's the thing, if you don't see stories as a huge part of selling, then you're going to start to have trouble growing your business. And I want to know, what do people see stories as? So I want you to put in the chat, what are the different ways that you can see stories play out other than selling? Just key in, what do you see stories as, if it's not to sell?
I see testimonials here, relationship building, personal brand, connection, opening up personal connection, a lot of personal connecting here, and relational, informational.
Yep. Beautiful. Thank you for that, John.
You bet.
So here's the thing. Education, information, entertainment, content. Is that what stories are? Absolutely. And brand stories are a different kind as well. But the problem is that if you don't see stories as a strategic part of selling, then all you're doing is entertaining or informing or educating, and you won't get clients. So there is a big difference between a story that tells and a story that sells. I mean, when I say I'm going to tell you a story, what does that conjure up? I want to tell you a story. Does anyone want to key something into the chat there? When I start by saying, you know what, I'm going to tell you a story, what does that conjure up?
Waiting for a response. Intrigue from Glenn.
Intrigue?
Yeah, he's intrigued. He wants to hear it.
Yeah. What about once upon a time?
Engagement. Hope it won't be boring. Parent to child.
I hope it won't be boring. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope it won't be boring. We do. We tend to think up when we hear the words, I want to tell you a story, we will put something on it. And in most cases, it's kind of like, we think of story and we think of fairy tale as well. We think of, okay, I'm going to read my child a story tonight. And then what happens is with that assumption or with that meaning is a subconscious assumption that says, is this going to be true? Or is it made up? And then there's those people, I think we all have probably done it ourselves. I know I have. We've definitely heard, you know what, I'm going to tell you a true story. I'm going to tell you a story, this true story about one of my clients. So does that mean that stories are usually not true? Or do we think that this story is going to be made up? So we need to be very careful that the assumption of fiction and fantasy is kept in our child's storybooks or in Hollywood and not brought into our soul's conversation. So I would suggest when you do go to tell a story, not to frame it that you are going to tell a story, if that makes sense. If, however, your purpose in telling a story is to create some kind of commercial transformation and you're going to sell it with story, then it's really important that that story begins to shift the way that your buyer thinks. Because stories are a money magnet. If you nail a story, it can transform your business completely. It's that classic dilemma that nobody cares about your product because they don't. Okay? And so I want to share 3 main elements with you now on how to become a story seller and how to sell with story and being in a position to do it a little bit more succinctly. Because if you don't make the shift and incorporate story into your conversations and continue to talk logic or opinion or high-level assertion, basically to educate, then you won't get to that point where your buyer experiences any transformation because they won't buy. Because it's only when they become clients that they begin to see the real change that you are wanting to sell them. So when I say selling, a lot of people have a hang up about selling. You know, they say, I don't want to be pushy. And so I've kind of created this model, if you like, which I call the story seller circles. And it's an idea that when you tell stories, you should also sell. And so the story selling circles consist of these 3 elements, for want of a better word, I guess. And that is story catching. And story catching they are the internal stories that you tell yourself. They are the stories you tell yourself about your buyer before you even speak to them. The second is the external stories, and they are the stories you actually tell your buyer. They are the stories that you would tell a potential buyer when you meet them. They might be a story that you tell your buyer about your company, about somebody else that you're working with. It could be a story that is a success story versus a case study. A success story is about your client. A case study is about you couched in your client. There are a number of different stories that you tell your buyer that we refer to as external stories. And thirdly, is the essential stories, those stories that you must elicit from your buyer. And these are the stories which are so often missed, because people aren't asking the right questions to get the right stories from their buyer. And when they get those right stories, it does the heavy lifting for them for their demonstrations, their proposals, and for their negotiations. And so when you can market your influence this way, you will influence your market. And so we refer to this model as the StorySeller model. And so I'm going to pull apart a couple of these over the next few minutes. And so I think what's really important is that you get very clear on the stories that you are telling yourself about your buyer, your deal, your opportunity, your pipeline first. So what are some of those things that you struggle with, which you've shared? What is the meaning or the narrative behind that? And so I want to introduce you to Jeff. Jeff was one of my clients in Australia. Unbelievable story this. He owns Australasia's premier business improvement network with 250 plus members. Now, Jeff came to us and he is a mature businessman and he had struggled with the perception of sales and how to position himself within his target market so that he didn't use elevator pitches, he didn't sound salesy, and so he didn't miss those opportunities and leave money on the table. This was quite intriguing. He was able, and this is the quote that he put, "I challenged myself to change my own story and apply what I'd learned." We have a couple of different models within our program. The primary question, which is how you elicit your own story, and the values model. And he said, for our next paid international expert webinar, we quadrupled the attendees, increased our pipeline of new business opportunities, and now needs more staff as a result. So what part scares you about the story that you tell yourself about your buyer? And I want to ask you this question. How well crafted is the story that you tell yourself about your buyer when it comes to things like money, value, or negotiations? How well crafted is the story? And where would you rate your story catching conversations? Those stories that you've got to catch yourself telling yourself. Where would you rate them on a scale of 1 to 10? Key that number into the chat if you could. And Julie or John, if you could call out some of those numbers, that would be awesome.
Got a 3, a 6 to 7.
Awesome.
From Jeff, a 4.5 from Frank, a 6 from Jose.
Imagine if you could just bring that up a couple of points just by shifting the story you tell yourself. So let's move on to principle number 2. And I want you to make it about decision. You need to make your narrative about decision. So what do I mean by that? This is a kind of a big one. So I want you to listen, tune in those ears and grab your pen and paper because it's a biggie. One of the mistakes, the biggest mistakes that we hear salespeople make is talking about product, okay? We know that. We make the conversation about us. We know it's not about our story, it's about their story. So to stop leaving money on the table, you have to tell yourself, what you have to tell yourself about your buyer is that your conversations with them can't be about what you sell. Okay, they can't be about anything other than helping your buyer make a decision based on what is important to them. Now, let me break that down for you. We need to invite our buyer to each next phase of the conversation. Does that mean that we continually close them? Absolutely not. Does that mean we jump to the end where we ask them to buy? Absolutely not. It means being very, very conscious that if we are not taking the conversation forward and we're not creating some kind of an advancement where the buyer commits to doing something as well as us, then all we are doing is providing them with data and information. Here's the thing, your buyers want you to take them on a journey of transformation, or they wouldn't be talking to you. They want you to lead them. They want you to share insights with them, but they also want you to ask them questions. Where they're up to, where are they on a scale of 1 to 10? Because those questions, those little decisions, micro decisions, are leading the buyer down the path toward change. So we've all heard the cliche, we buy on emotion and we back it up with logic. And that's because stories bypass the logic part of the brain and they go straight to the real decision maker, the emotional part of the brain. And at the core of any sales conversation should be the intention that we help our buyer make a decision. And how we do that is through a series of questions, a series of stories, a series of anecdotes. The thing is, if we don't ask them what's important to them, if we don't ask them questions about numbers, if we don't ask them who else is involved, all we're doing is we're just providing information. And we know that too much data and too much product talk or too much information or monologues overwhelms a human being's brain. And when our brains are overwhelmed, we get confused. And a confused mind never decides and never buys. So I want you to look at this a different way. Hands up if you have ever taken advantage of something for free. A webinar like today, for example, or samples or free trials, or you've downloaded ebooks and you've taken that freebie, but you've done nothing with it. Okay? Imagine if the boot was on the other foot and your prospect took advantage of something that was free from you time and time again, and you checked in with them a few weeks later and they've done nothing. What would you think? That you just wasted a couple of hours. And what for? So we've all had that experience, right? The reason why they didn't do anything wasn't that they didn't know what to do. They hadn't made a congruent decision to do anything. And so all your how-tos, all your onboarding, all your implementation, all of that stuff has to come after the decision's made, not before the decision's made. Yet we spend so much time not asking for a decision or not asking for our buyer's story. When I moved to the USA, okay, so it's only, 10, 11 weeks ago. The whole process started late last year, like in real, like for real. So before I decided, I did all this research, okay? Figured out what it would take. I Googled till the cows come home. But it wasn't until I made a decision to hire an immigration lawyer, it wasn't until I did the transaction that the universe began to open up. Up until that point in time, I was just mucking around. And it didn't matter what checklist I just downloaded. It didn't matter what I got for free. There was no commitment. There was no momentum. I hadn't made a congruent decision, and congruent being the key word. And so sometimes, just like our buyers, nothing will happen until after the decision is made. And so it's our responsibility to move our buyer along the line of making those micro decisions and not shy away from it. And yet the internal stories we tell ourselves prevent us from doing this. And once you do, it's mind-blowing how quickly things will happen once you make a decision and once your buyer makes a decision. So I want you to write this down. The transaction is the transformation. Until your buyer makes a decision, there is no change in their business. And so the stories you tell yourself, the stories you elicit from your buyer through these questions and moving them along the track is all moving toward them changing their business once they make the decision. Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. I told you it was a big one, but it's such a key, important one. And so decision making is not just about, what's your budget? Or, you know, it's not just those kind of questions. There's so much more to elicit your buyer's decisions. You know, are they somebody who makes decisions internally, or do they rely on other people? Are they detailed people or a big picture? You know, are they early adopters or laggards? Do they make decisions because they have to make them, or because, guess what, I want to make them? Do they make decisions based on what could be in the future or what has been in the past? Convenience, I will pay extra if I can get convenience, versus somebody else who is penny pinching. How do you know how your buyer makes those decisions? And the toward and away, that's the one we all hear about all the time. Are they someone who moves towards pleasure or away from pain? There is so much to eliciting your buyer's decisions. And in all of these different styles, there are stories that you can elicit to find out what makes your buyer tick. So the third one, before we do that, what is it costing you and your clients because you're not helping them make a decision? What is it costing them because they haven't got your product or service? You're not changing their world, so it's costing them somehow. And on out of 10, how committed are you to help your clients make more powerful decisions? Key that into the box. Out of 10, how committed are you from today to help your clients make more powerful decisions?
Got a 10 here.
What was that?
I got lots of 10s here.
Awesome, guys. Excellent. That's the action takers in the room. Point number 3 is to follow a system. Now, for me to make this cake, well, if you knew my pantry, you would know that I am missing food colorings, I have no sugar, I get my baking soda mixed up with my corn flour, who knows what I mean. It would take me a lifetime to make a cake looking like this, even if I did it. You know, I might just bring in my own flavor and change the color of the icing maybe, or put some, you know, cream with it, I don't know. But the thing is, we all have to start by following a recipe. And that's just like our sales conversations as well, guys. We don't have all the resources in our sales pantry. You know, we'll wing things. We'll throw that in instead of that. You know, we don't stick to the recipe. We think taking shortcuts is the secret sauce. And our result is never what we want it to be. And the recipe is there in my little cookbook for a reason. It's a proven process for this cake to be made. But when we don't have a framework or a system for our stories, you know, not only are we not in flow, but our results are inconsistent. And until we stop doing things on the fly, we can't evolve into that transformational environment. And our profitability continues to be negatively impacted. And we keep reinventing the wheel all the time. So having a process definitely provides your buyer with certainty. And remember, I said before, our buyers, they're buying our certainty, they're buying our conviction. And when they feel that we're in control, it strengthens our success opportunities. And so I want you to realize that, you know, you are that person for your client. You know, what is your process? Are you wigging it when you go in? Are you preparing your case studies beforehand? Are you talking to yourself and getting your own stories sorted? Have you got your questions to ask to elicit your buyers' stories? So it's important that the conversation flows. And so one of the processes that we use, we call it an outcome-based questions model. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through this really briefly. It's based on neuroscience. It's based on neuro sales, which I call neuro sales, and it's outcome based. So for you to go in to your client's call, you've got to have an outcome in mind, but so does your buyer, and you need to understand what your buyer's is. You know, what do they want today, tomorrow? What do they want now? And where are they? How do you understand what they want today and tomorrow? How deep do you take those questions, or do you just take what they say on face value? A great question to elicit a buyer's story is give me an example. Can you give me an example? You know, how do you translate their answer or their story into something that makes sense? How do you know if that person's telling you a fib or not? You know, they say buyers are liars. I think that's a little harsh, but sometimes our buyers, if they're not into us, they will come up with any excuse. So how can you understand or make sure that they are congruent? Who's in control? You know, are they saying they are, but it's not really? But how can you kind of have that conversation without hurting their ego? How do you gain agreement? You know, what about the resources that not just you have, but what about their resources? How do you have that conversation so that they can become a champion for you? And how does it make a real positive impact? So it's a win-win-win. So I want you to think about the essential stories, those questions that you're not asking your buyer that perhaps would be effective if you did. And how much untapped money would you predict is sitting in your buyer's stories right now, waiting for you to elicit those stories from them? How effectively have you asked the right questions and leveraged your conversations in the right way in the last 30 days to get your customers' stories? So let's do a quick recap. The premise is that you are only one story selling conversation away from the business growth you've always wanted, without feast and famine, without undercharging, discounting, or those hard sell tactics. Secondly, we've looked at where you sit on the conversion quadrant, and most of you were too chatty. How do you elevate your conversation so that you begin to increase or make your connection more effective and by default increase your conversion rates? And we looked at the StorySeller circles, how to market your influence and how to influence your market by getting really clear on those 3 different types of stories. Catching the stories you tell yourself, being able to externally tell the stories to your buyer, and being able to seek the right stories from your buyer. We've looked at how to sell with story, we've looked at making it about decision, and we've also looked at following a system. So I want to know what has resonated the most with you guys. Please key it in the chat. What has resonated the most from what I've shared with you today?
I could tell you what resonated with me.
Yeah.
What I hear from them is exactly what was mine, the circles, the story selling circles. I think we could probably spend a week unfolding those.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the beauty of the story selling circles, from my perspective, I'm really fortunate. I'm able to bring in my corporate. I'm also able to bring in Tony Robbins, and I'm also able to bring in Anecdote, which is my partner here in the US. So I'm really glad to hear that, because it is totally so powerful when you can start to drill down. Was there anything else before we move on?
Following the system, key into the customer's needs, conversation quadrant. It's not your story, it's theirs. Follow the system.
Yeah, awesome. It's not their story, it's yours. It's a combination, absolutely. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to picture yourself. It could be 3 days from today. What are we, Wednesday? It could be the weekend. It could be 3 weeks from now. It could be 3 months from now. And I want you to imagine something for a minute. I want you to imagine that you're sitting with one of your clients and you are listening to what they are saying. And you are looking at their face and you are seeing that the impact you have made in that conversation is so much greater because you've asked a couple of extra questions. I want you to picture your team. Because you've taken some of these ideas forward and you've acted on them, you're actually able to have different conversations. I want you to see yourself as a story seller, because that's the person that I want to speak to next. I know that you've shared some time with me now and it's been really rushed, but some of you will be thinking, okay, what are the next steps and how can I, get more learnings if I wanted to? And so this slide coming up is for you. The Sales Acceleration Program is what I'm offering a Nimble's database, Nimble's clients, Nimble's potential clients. And that's the ability to identify the key stories to tell yourself to master influence and grow revenue. And if you go to salesaccelerationprogram.com, you will be able to see all of this data. This program that I'm going to offer to you at half price is just for you guys. 4 modules, 17 videos, 2 bonuses to up your game. You get a coaching session with me as well. So module 1 is 6 lessons complete with exercises to nail your identity. Module 2 are all those exercises and worksheets and videos to change the key stories you tell yourself that sabotage your deals. Module 3 is the same videos, worksheets to help you better communicate with the C-level and nail those decisions. And module 4 is how do you master your influence and how do you invest in your reputation, and also trying to find out how to find that decision maker and have that conversation. And so what I've done, normally $4.97 per person, and by the way, this is open slather, you can have it, you know, you can go have it access to all of them at once. Today it's $248, well actually for the next 2 weeks, it's $248.50 per person. So I'm leaving it there for 2 weeks. And so what I want you to do is go to this website, salesaccelerationprogram.com, click on that reserve my spot, and there is your coupon, Nimble. And so I would love to see you on the other side of this. I would love to work with you over the next few weeks. In 2 weeks' time, we'll do the coaching and hope to see you there. And on that note, I am going to pass you back to John.
Bernadette, that was fantastic. I really love the formula of learning how to unfold your customer story, because if you ask good questions, they'll tell you exactly what you need to serve them. And we're not really selling to customers, we're helping them make decisions for their growth, right? Like
Correct.
Anybody on this webinar, anybody who's really in business to do good is not really trying to make money by slamming people with more products and services. They're trying to find people to help grow. And people are desperate to grow. And so I love your structure and your program to do that. So definitely, guys, reach out to Bernadette and connect with her on her programs. If you are using Nimble, thank you so much for being a subscriber. If you're not using Nimble and are in trial, here's a gift. You get 40% off your first 3 months. Just use the code John40 in the subscription. And let's get to some questions. So now's a time to pop in your questions in the Q&A box. And we'll do our best to answer them in the remaining time. And while we're waiting for the questions, Bernadette, what's a typical sort of question that somebody might ask in regards to story selling instead of storytelling?
So a typical question, from who to who?
From somebody who's a seller, and they're sort of just used to maybe, because I heard a lot of people saying that they're the chatty Cathys, the chatty Chucks. And so I think a lot of salespeople are excited about what they sell. They want to talk about their products and services, or they spend too much time connecting on their personal side and talking about their common love of baseball or barbecue or whatever
Correct.
it is. And they never really get to uncovering their customers, where they're at, where they want to go, and how they might help them get there. So what's a question that somebody asked that says, how do I change to become a story seller instead of a teller?
Yeah, good point. And, you know, throughout the sales process, for want of a better word, I guess, the different milestones in a sales conversation, and we're not talking about just one conversation where it all happens in one conversation, by the way, guys. You know, this can be, it could be that and I'm going to come back to it. There is one question that you must always ask, which I will come back to that in a sec. But I just want to frame it from the storytelling. We know storytelling is just one component of the StorySeller circles. And so to tell a story when you meet somebody, you need to have and I hate that elevator pitch stuff, you need to be able to have a short, succinct story that is relevant to your buyer. When you do share what it is you do, make sure that you flip the end of it. So give them an example of what you do, but then flip it and say, enough about me, what about you? And so, you know, that could be at a networking event, that could be when you meet a client for the first time. Yes, you have to introduce yourself, but you also have to make sure that you don't waffle and that you get your point across. So for example, let me give you an example. I work with businesses with their sales team to help build out the sales function, but to also minimize buyer resistance, to help them master influence and to build trust. For example, just last week, I worked with a group of people where we were able to do that, and they were able to completely shift the way they introduce themselves. I'm really curious, tell me a little bit about you. That's it, because people do love talking about themselves. And what we want is we want to elicit their stories.
I love that.
So that's kind of one. That would be one when you're introducing yourself. And I guess just to take it a bit further for people, you know, if you're on a Zoom or a phone call or in person, it doesn't really matter. You do have to transition from you, the reason that you're there, to them pretty quickly. You know, and it could be, look, I know, John, that you are really keen to hear about story selling, and we have 3 different frameworks. I'd love to talk about that later, but before we do that, I just got a couple of questions to ask you about Nimble.
Yeah, you definitely want to get, this has sort of been my secret to connecting with others at scale, is you do your homework beforehand. You know enough about them and their company, but you really want to start by asking some commonality things about, you know, build the connection in the first maybe 30 seconds, a minute, but then quickly transition to, so Bernadette, I've really been looking forward to this connection. Of course, I've done my homework, but I'd love to hear it in your own words. What gets you up in the morning? What keeps you up at night? Right? And then just quiet. So we have a question from Lynn. She says that they are a mission-based company of digital technologists who all live with disabilities. People come to them because of their life expertise with living disabilities, but they struggle with their story of overwhelming their buyers. We struggle with our story overwhelming our buyers' stories. Any tips on blending the two? Okay, so what she's saying is exactly what we're talking about, is that they are mission-based technologists who live with disabilities, and what they're struggling with is that sometimes their stories overwhelm the buyer's story, just like all of us, right? We're all so excited about what we do. We want to talk about it and ourselves, but we don't really like do that succinctly and transition to opening up like you did in your example.
Yeah, and the other thing, Lynn, is definitely what John has just said. The other thing as well is how can you flip from what you do to bringing in a story about one of your clients that relates to that particular conversation? And that's the important part. It's got to relate.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's key.
Awesome.
Another one from Tim. He says, life-changing info, truly enjoyed your delivery. I'll be using your program. What is your suggestion on how to bring the client down initially from the other salesman demo / BS attitude on that first contact? I'm not quite sure I get what he's saying. Did you get that?
I think I might. I'm just not quite certain on what you mean by bring the client down. I'm going to take a stab, Tim. I was at Xerox, back in Xerox days, I would win all the demonstration competitions. And I wear that as a badge of honor because we were very fortunate in that we had a process for demonstrations, and we used to get tested on it regularly, like role plays in front of the equipment. And so what I see today with demos is that there is no preamble. So there is no eliciting from the buyer their story on what their outcome is, why they're there, what they hope to achieve, what's led them there. Just trying to think of some of the bullet points from our process that we used to go through. And usually between, if you have had that preamble and then it's time for the demo, what's changed? Because something may have changed in the meantime.
Yeah. And
so asking, what's changed since we last spoke, nothing may have changed. Great. So you can then continue the demo. There's something else that I think is really important for you guys when you do your demos, is that there's criteria and that there's an agreement before the demo of what's going to happen at the end of the demo if it meets their needs. But you can't have that conversation unless you've had the preamble where you understand what their needs are. So today, too many people are just jump on a demo and I'm going to show you how it works. And that's not going to get you business.
Yeah.
I hope that helps, Tim.
Say again?
I hope that helps, Tim.
I think it does. I think what Tim was essentially saying is that he gets on the phone with a customer and that customer is all pumped up from some presentation by somebody else. And I think a lot of salespeople just want to jump in and start talking about their stuff. But unless you understand who somebody is, where they're at, where they want to go, what's causing change.
I'm actually going to throw something else in there if Tim's still on the line and for anybody else. If you remember back to the beginning of my presentation, I said this is going to be different. Now, what I did there also was I interrupted your pattern of thinking. And so you in your demos or your sales conversations or your presentations could do exactly the same thing. But you need to know why it's different. So Tim, if you have got a client that's just come off probably come off a couple of demos before you as well, is to use that language and say, Tim, this demo is going to be different, and here's how. Just a thought.
I love that. Tim says it does. Very helpful. Thanks. And with that, let's get to the contact slides.
Yeah,
because I think you all should connect with Bernadette, because Bernadette has shared a brief amount of her knowledge and skill sets with you in this webinar, but because I've known her so long and I've actually taken her workshops, I can tell you that if you spend time with Bernadette, it will change the way you sell. And also, she's just a great person to know. So this is all of Bernadette's contact info. I encourage you to reach out and connect with her. For those that want to connect with me, Google me. In fact, Google yourself. Do you show up on the first page? If you don't, you can fix that. Build a Wikipedia page about yourself. It's free and easy as long as you follow the rules. And connect with me on whatever channel that makes sense for you, because I am on many of the channels. And if you want to reach out to me, my email is john@nimble.com. Tell me who you are and how our team can help you grow. And with that, we'll be sending a copy of the video to all of the registrants and attendees. And Bernadette, I just want to say thank you for
my pleasure.
Friendship and joining us today to share your wisdom.
Yep, and I'm a Nimble user, and it's my pleasure. So excellent.
Thank you all. And thank you, Nimble marketing team, Julie, Jenna, and Julia. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.